Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey everybody, it's Jared. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. We are excited to have you on this morning and appreciate you following us. Make sure to hit subscribe and hit like and even write us a little comment on there. That would be awesome. We appreciate you listening. And I am super excited this morning to have a district attorney from Sacramento. His name is Thien Ho. And man, it's there's so much we want to talk about, but one of the coolest things about not only being a DA, but also he's wrote a book. So, Mr. Ho, I appreciate you coming on. And you know what? I'll let you introduce yourself because I know that I'll butcher it, and the audience would probably appreciate it hearing it from you a little better anyway.
Sure. So my name is Thien Ho. I am the elected district attorney of Sacramento County. I've been in that position for 3 years, but before that, I've been a prosecutor for almost 25 years now. And so I wrote a book called The People versus the Golden State Killer. It's getting released on November the 11th of 2025. And it's sort of what I call the end of a trilogy. So Michelle McNamara wrote her book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, about the Golden State Killer. Unfortunately, she passed away before we caught him. Once we caught him, Paul Hose, my colleague, who was an investigator on the case and came up with the idea of using investigative genetic genealogy to solve the case, wrote a book. But it was about the investigation and how he was caught. Well, once we caught him and we started prosecuting him, I was the lead prosecutor out of 6 different counties that sent prosecutors. And so I have written a book called The People versus the Golden State Killer. It's the end of the trilogy. It covers both the investigation, the capture, and the prosecution of the Golden State Killer.
Wow. Can people, I want to get a copy of this, of all the cases that have been solved, and especially for those of you that have followed this show, we talk about investigative genealogy all the time. And I've met Paul, especially at, I don't know, have you ever gone to CrimeCon, Thien?
You know, I was going to go to CrimeCon this year in September, but my plan is I'm going to be going to CrimeCon in Vegas next year in May. So I'm definitely going to be there. In fact, I was talking to Paul beforehand. And so, in fact, he has reviewed the book. And he gave it a raving review as well. And you can get the book and pre-order it ahead of time, and it should come before the release date. But you can order the book on thienho.org. That's THIENHO.org. It will send you to a link where you can buy the book from a local bookstore, because we need to support our local bookstores. But I'd love to talk to you about the book, because there are things that I reveal that has never been revealed before about the Golden State Killer in terms of the investigation, the capture, and the prosecution.
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, I wanted to get that out of the way so that now we can get into the nitty gritty of it. I am so excited about it. So, as far as the Golden State Killer, I think a lot of people know about the amazing number of crimes that he committed, not just murders, but and then I think most people know about the investigative genealogy that kind of broke the case. But it's exciting for you to come on and talk about what. So once the okay. So answer this. When did you really start becoming involved? And because I know the prosecution has to come in and talk extensively with the investigators to say, this is what I need in order to put together a case.
Mm-hmm. So, sort of the genesis of the case, I mean, it's been going on 40 years. He committed 13 known murders, upwards of 50 sexual assault, over 120 burglaries in 11 different counties. So you can imagine, you know, the 1970s and 1980s, the investigation that went into it, but everybody was siloed. And the investigation continued and continued and continued until 2018, we actually located and found him. And once we did, that prosecution process started where and a person is arraigned in court, meaning they go to court for the very first time, and they're told what the charges are, and the process begins. And so soon after that arraignment, I was brought in to oversee the prosecution of the entire case, which dealt with, for example, collecting all the evidence, all the discovery from the 11 different counties, whether they be police reports, whether they be lab reports, whether they be interviews of thousands of suspects, right? And then also all the forensic evidence in terms of how we found them, you know, and then try to recreate that and move forward in terms of prosecuting him. You know, and one of the interesting things that I talk about in the book that has never been discussed before is his interrogation. It's been hinted about. It's you know, I foreshadowed it a little bit when I was in court on it. But soon after he was arrested by what we call the body snatchers. So there's a group of deputy sheriffs, and they're part of an elite team. And their job is to go find people and then to arrest them based upon arrest warrants, fugitive warrants. And their nickname is the Body Snatchers. When you look at them, they're sort of a motley crew. They get to wear beards, they got tattoos, you know, they wear cargo pants and hats and try to blend in with everybody else, you know, and they're big guys. And so their job is to go find people, to snatch them up and to bring them to justice. And so once we located him, it was the job of the Body Snatchers to go out and arrest him. And so I detail like a play-by-play of how his arrest went down by the Body Snatchers. And then he was taken into an interview room. And I go through play-by-play the interrogation, what he said in that interrogation. And one of the keys about an interrogation, it's almost as if it's like a dance. And you have to almost have a partner to dance with, but you have to massage in a certain way and move together with a certain rhythm, because you want them to talk. You want them to give up information. You want them to admit things and talk about things. And so there's a delicate process. And his interview was unique. One of the most unique interrogation I've ever seen, because once they put him in the room, and we can talk about this more, he just sat there and said nothing for the longest time. They even offered him Dr. Pepper, and he refused. Jared, are you familiar with the Golden State Killer's connection with Dr. Pepper?
Oh, I'm not. No. What is that?
So at a number of the crime scenes of the East Area Rapist, so the Golden State Killer is known by many different monikers, right? He's been known as the East Area Rapist, the East Bay Rapist, the Visalia Ransacker, the original Night Stalker, and the Golden State Killer. So when he was committing his rapes in Sacramento, he would drink people's beer. But one thing that he loved to drink and he would leave behind were cans of Dr. Pepper. He loved Dr. Pepper. And so when we arrested Joseph DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer, what did we find inside his house? Cases upon cases of Dr. Pepper. So we're now in the interrogation room, right? And the detective, Kenny Clark, the lead detective, kept offering, hey, you know, Joe, do you want some Dr. Pepper? We have Dr. Pepper, even brought it in for him. And he would just sit there and say nothing, no reaction. And when the detectives left the room, you could see him kind of licking his lips, right? You could tell that he was thirsty because he hadn't drank anything for like 3 hours from the point where we arrested him to where we initiated the interrogation. We let him sit there for a while. That's an interrogation technique, so that they just kind of stew in their own juices. And so we put Dr. Pepper out for him. And we knew he was thirsty. We knew he wanted to drink it. And we offered him the Dr. Pepper, but he wouldn't take it. And in his mind, he was afraid that we were going to collect his DNA after he drank that Dr. Pepper. But what he didn't know, what he didn't realize, was we already collected his DNA outside his house from a trash run about a week before that, where we had a detective dressed up as a garbage guy. We took a plastic, we lined it inside of a garbage truck, drove up, picked up the garbage, dumped it in, and then we found a piece of tissue. The last thing we tested. And we tested that, and that's what connected him to all the rapes and all the murders that we had DNA left on.
Oh, that's so interesting. I'm not sure that's what Dr. Pepper wants to be known for, but it's interesting when you talk about different interrogation techniques. There's a whole, I think you nailed it. There's a whole art to it. And the important thing is getting them to feel comfortable enough that they'll actually start talking. So it's fascinating. So
And can I follow up on that, Jared, real
yeah,
quick?
please,
The
please.
interrogation. So we put him inside the interrogation room, and he sits there for the longest time. He's not talking. So finally, one of the techniques that we have is they start coming at him like, I'm sure you're curious as to why you're here, right? Because when they're arrested, especially after 40 years, the number one thing they're thinking in their mind is, why have I been arrested? What charges am I looking at? And most importantly, what evidence do they have? Right. And so, right in the beginning of the interrogation, and I do a play-by-play in the book, they teased him a little bit with why he was arrested. And they asked him, hey, if you want to hear why you're arrested, let us know. And then they have to read him his Miranda rights, right? And then, so there's a whole song and dance about his Miranda rights, his right to remain silent in that interrogation that I talk about. But at one point, they confronted him with the murders of Brian and Katie Maggiore in Sacramento. They confronted him with the rapes in Sacramento. They confronted him with the murder and rape of Charlene Smith and Lyman Smith down in Ventura. And so that was the whole dramatic scene behind there. And at first, he doesn't say anything. But the key part is when the detectives left the room and he was sitting there by himself, what it was he was saying. And so it was really intriguing. And he started teasing what I would call setting up a mental defense. And I talk about this in the book. And the mental defense was what we call dissociative identity disorder or split personality disorder. And so we detail the whole kind of what he said about that in the book and how we try to counter that to beat that alleged defense he was setting up.
Oh, it's fascinating. So a couple questions. One is what do you think is the primary evidence that you had that generated the warrant for you to actually go and get him and pick him up?
DNA. Really, the primary evidence is DNA. You have to understand that, the way society viewed sexual assault in the 1970s is different than now. The statute of limitation back then was only 3 years. And so the problem was a lot of the sexual assaults in Sacramento, in the Bay Area, the DNA was all thrown away, except for several cases in Contra Costa where Paul Holes worked. And the DNA was tested there. They had a profile, a suspect. And then there were the rapes and the murders down in Ventura, Santa Barbara, and Orange County. And those were all connected by DNA. And then back in 2001, the Southern California crimes were connected to the Contra Costa crimes by DNA. And then the Contra Costa crimes were connected to the Sacramento crimes by MO. And for your viewers who are not familiar with the MO of the East Area Rapist or the Golden State Killer, he would break into the home at 1 o'clock in the morning, shine a flashlight on the husband and wife. He would force the wife to tie up the husband with pre-tied shoelaces that he brought with him. Then he'd tie up the wife. Then he would walk around the house, eating their food, drinking their beer, drinking their Dr. Pepper. And then he'd come back and using a ruse, remove the wife into another room looking for a purse. He'd come back, tie up the husband again, make the husband get on all fours and put a bed sheet on him. He stacked perfume bottles and glasses on the husband and say, if I hear anything fall, I'll cut your son's ear off and bring it to you. I'll kill everybody in the family. Then he'd go in the other room and sexually assault the wife again and again. And before he would leave, he would take the wedding band. He would take one earring but leave the other behind to remind him of what he had taken and what was left. And so that was tied together. So the primary evidence that connected him for the arrest warrant was the DNA evidence and the MO.
Oh, it's absolutely fascinating. Describe really quickly I don't, most people I don't think have been in an interrogation room, but the ones that I've actually been in,
And that's a
uh,
good thing.
yeah, not as a suspect of anything, but just sitting in one. It has all of this, sound stuff it's definitely silent, and I'm assuming that most interrogation rooms are like that, and so literally you can hear your own heartbeat, and I'm assuming that's part of the interrogation, correct?
Absolutely. So this interrogation room, you have a metal door that just clangs really loud when it opens and closes. And inside, it's like beige wall, and it's four walls, and there's no windows in it. There's a metal table. There's some plastic chairs that are in there. There's a metal loop where the suspect is handcuffed to, so they can't escape. And the room is literally bathed in that government fluorescent light color that just makes everything antiseptic. There's nothing alive in that room. But the room, the interrogation room, it sees everything, it hears everything, it knows everything, it never forgets anything because there's a recording device inside that room. And that's the place that we put DeAngelo. When he comes in after his arrest, this seems like a chubby old grandfather or an uncle. He's wearing a white t-shirt, cargo shorts, and shoes with two socks. And here he is, the boogeyman of so many people's nightmares and childhood, sitting inside this interrogation room, and everything that is about to then happen to him. And we set it up in a way where we try to make him think, make him really stew, and kind of isolate him before we get in there.
Yeah. So the psychology of that is fascinating by itself. But once he gets into that room, how long did you let him stew?
We let him stew for nearly almost an hour and 45 minutes.
Okay, that's a
So a
long
good
time to just be in a room where your thoughts are probably as loud in your head as your heartbeat is. Um, well, that's awesome. And then, so who actually did the interrogation?
So the interrogation was done really by a team of detectives. So the first was Sergeant Kenny Clark. He was the lead detective from the Sacramento Sheriff's Department. He had a near encyclopedic memory of the entire case, not just in Sacramento, but up and down the state. There was also Detective Michelle Hendricks of the sexual assault team. And then what was interesting and added some flavor to this was an investigator from the Ventura County District Attorney's Office, Steve Rose. And Kenny Clark has what I call the radio voice, right? And Steve Rose is this thin, wiry, leathery cop with this deep, gravelly voice. And of course, we played the good cop, bad cop. Kenny Clark was the good cop, and Investigator Rose was the bad cop. And they sort of played off each other to try to get him to go at it. And one point, at the end of the interrogation, Investigator Rose, and I sort of describing there, walks up to him, puts his hand on DeAngelo's shoulder and says, "I know you did it." And so, there's a whole kind of play with that. And from the interrogation, we then moved on to the prosecution of the case. And one of the things, as we're going through the prosecution, we have to really retrace every single step of DeAngelo's life. Try to fill in all the blanks from the moment he was born in Bath, New York, to the moment he, was arrested in Citrus Heights outside in front of his house wearing those cargo shorts and the white T-shirt. Interviewing his family, interviewing his ex-wife, his kids, interviewing his former brother-in-law, interviewing his friends, his former co-workers, everybody in his family that's still alive, to really dig into and find out and get a picture of the monster behind the mask. And there were things that we found out about his childhood, particularly his adolescence. He was already in his adolescence, and this isn't out publicly yet, but he was breaking into homes, stealing things, just knickknacks and little things of sentimental values for people, and he was learning how to do it using a screwdriver or a butter knife, and he became almost an expert in it, in how he did it. And we found out about that because one of the other teenagers that he befriended, the two of them started breaking into homes. In the book, I talk about an incident where they broke into a home in Rancho Cordova, only about less than a mile away from where he committed his first rape. And DeAngelo was only a teenager at the time. So he sneaks into the garage, and the door was open. So the two of them come into the garage. As they step foot into the garage, there's a German Shepherd that comes running out from the garage, barking, right? That's what German Shepherds do. They protect their home. And DeAngelo kind of, stumbled backwards, fell down, and hurt his wrist. And he was so angry that he wanted to hurt the dog. And he says, I'm going to get that dog. I'm going to get that dog. And his co-conspirator, his partner in crime, who was also a teenager, said, look, that dog's just doing what he's supposed to do. Don't hurt the dog. But DeAngelo was so angry that he pulled out an M80 firecracker, lit it, threw it into the garage, and it blew up underneath the dog. And the dog caught on fire and died. And if you know about some of his crimes as the East Area rapist, as the Golden State Killer, he hated dogs, in particular German Shepherds, those big guard dogs. And I think that we can trace it back to this particular incident and what happened to him. But, we hear about serial killers all the time, abusing animals. And DeAngelo was no different than all those serial killers. He abused animals, even at a young age. And I talk about some of that and some of the other facts that have not been released about DeAngelo in the book.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.